Now, before we begin today's session, please know that all of us at NYU hope you and your family are safe and well in these unprecedented times. We are so thankful you have chosen to spend some time with us today to continue learning from the collective knowledge of our NYU community. The NYU Alumni Association represents nearly 600,000 alumni all over the world. On average, we host nearly 700 events annually to connect you with your alumni community and with NYU. In light of the current global crisis, we have moved our programming online and are pleased you are joining us for today's session, Farming, Canning, and Pickling at Home. Today's session features Professor Melissa Metrick in conversation with Professor Jennifer Berg. If you have questions during the session, please enter them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will get to as many questions as we can at the conclusion of the program. Thank you all for joining us. Jenny and Melissa, I will pass the lead over to you.
Great, thank you, Amanda. Jenny, I think you might still be muted, sorry.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Sorry about that. Hello, everybody, good afternoon. Fellow alums, both Melissa and I are also proud NYU alums, and we're happy to spend a little bit of time this afternoon talking to you about urban farming. Melissa, can I just start and ask a question, or did you want to say a quick welcome of any sort?
Sure, yeah, I just want to say thank you for everybody in being interested in this topic. You can see that a lot of people have been interested in growing their own food at home and how to preserve and all of these other techniques. So we're actually really excited to share this with you. Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Great, and many of you might not know that NYU actually has an urban farm right on Houston Street. So I was thinking, Melissa, maybe you could tell us all a little bit about what exactly is the NYU Urban Farm Lab.
Yes, definitely, that would be great. So this is just a couple of things that we're going to go over. But yes, so the NYU Farm Lab is a mix of a bunch of different things. So it's where we teach a class, Introduction to Urban Agriculture. So, sorry, one second. Yeah, so it's a place where we could actually practice what we're learning in the classroom. So students learn how to grow food from seed to harvest. It's amazing because they learn all of these different techniques that are pretty much organic techniques, sustainable techniques, and then they also get to take home the produce. So students love taking this class. It's really kind of fun and exciting for them, and they get to eat all this healthy fruits and vegetables. The class or the farm also hosts, it's also a community center, so it is right behind the Silver Tower buildings, which have faculty, residents, and so we also have plots on the farm where the residents could actually farm as well. We have a community events, so we have annual events like our Harvest Festival, where we welcome the community to harvest fruits and vegetables from the farm, which is really exciting. We also give tours all the time to other classes. We do workshops. We were actually a part of the World Science Festival, which was really exciting, and we had young students come and we taught them about sustainable farming, so that was great. We also have other plots on the farm. So we have our student clubs. So the Nutrition and Food Studies Department has a bunch of different clubs. And then I get together with them once a week, and all the clubs kind of get together and we all grow fruits and vegetables. And then sometimes we'll eat together. So that's really exciting. We also have plots for our study abroad classes, which is really fun. Jenny actually teaches some of these classes, so it's really great. We have students explore all of these different places all over the world, and then they actually look at the varieties that are being grown there. And then we try to grow it on the farm, which is really fun. And then after we grow all of this produce, they try to recreate these dishes that they've experienced in these places that they visited. So that's always kind of a fun experience as well. Second to last thing, we also grow all of this produce for the NYU Food Lab, which is part of the Nutrition and Food Studies Department, where students, managers from the NYU Food Lab will go and harvest from the farm, and then they'll use it in the kitchen classes. So during the herb class, they get to study like 20 different varieties of herbs, which is really fun and exciting, and they get to identify it in the actual kitchen, and it's fresh from the farm. So that's always a great experience. So we also like to kind of do that with the farm as well. Jenny, would you actually like to talk about the student research on the farm and the students that you've worked with?
Sure, I'm going to, but before I talk about the research, I just want to say something about Melissa's class, Intro to Urban Agriculture. I don't remember if it was the Daily News, which publication it was last year, that highlighted the 5 hottest courses to take in New York, and Intro to Urban Agriculture was on that list. I think it was #1. So I'm going to put a little shout out. As one of 2 faculty members who received the grant and are, quote, the directors of the farm, we're so lucky to be able to work with Melissa. And what she does is she allows us to have 1 bed that's reserved for student research projects. So an example, the photos that you're looking at here is the most recent research project. We worked with a graduate student, Magdalene Adrioni, last year. She was, before coming to NYU as a graduate student in food studies, she was a professional bread baker. And she was really interested in looking and bringing back some of these regional local grains. These are ancient grains like einkorn and teff that you might have read about in the Bible. And so these are ones that people are not, we've moved away from growing. And so she wanted to see with the validity and the capability of bringing back these regional grains. And so part of it was we worked with the collective of the Regional Grains Project that is at Union Square. And they gave us seeds, and together with Magdalene, we had 1 full bed on the plot of land growing these grains. And part of it was working with farmers in upstate New York in economically fragile areas to learn about added value for crops. It was a project that looked at community economic development, environmental stewardship, and also increased texture and taste in bread. We were really proud of her at the end of this project. She received a Fulbright, and she was in Italy this past year continuing this research. So it was just one example. We're also growing hops. We're going to be growing some other grains and maybe looking at distilling research, beer production, lots of really amazing projects.
And the great aspect of that is that most people in urban areas, especially in New York City, don't even know what grains look like when they're being grown. So it's not only just like these ancient varieties, but just like, you know, common varieties of wheat and things like that. People find it really interesting that we're growing a bed of wheat on Houston Street. They're like, what are you guys doing over there? So it's kind of really fun and exciting and really great to be able to share that with students in the community in general.
Yeah, we bring the students who are taking food history with us, for example, to come in and they can actually see grains. And so many students who have grown up in really urban areas just have never seen what wheat looks like when it is growing. So those amber waves of grain right on Houston Street.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Melissa, if you could take us back some steps and tell us a little bit about the history of urban agriculture, especially now we're in the middle of COVID crisis. If you could tell us sort of this relationship to urban agriculture in times of crises.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. So just the next slide would be great. Thanks. So history of urban agriculture, a lot of people think that urban agriculture just kind of came about in like 2008 or 2010. We saw it a lot in the media. With all of these rooftop farms popping up and things like that. But actually urban agriculture has been practiced for hundreds, thousands of years, people have always been growing within cities, but especially in New York City, we see that a lot of times this happens during times of crisis. So we could think about during the Great Depression, urban agriculture was pushed by the federal government and things like that. In New York City, when the city almost went bankrupt, that's when our community gardens came about, and a lot of grassroots organizations. If you think about World War I and World War II, the idea of victory gardens, and we're starting to hear victory gardens come back again. During these times of crises, and especially with financial crises or a war or depression or something like that, people want to learn how to be more self-sustenant, right? So they want to learn how to grow their own food. Also, a lot of us have a lot of time on our hands. We're home, we may not want to go to the supermarket all the time. So it's also a great idea to be able to grow your own food. And then also just the idea of, in general, watching something grow almost gives you a little bit of hope. It keeps you interesting. You see this thing change, this living thing change every day. So it's kind of really exciting. And also just the idea of preserving, right? So that's also kind of being more self-sustenant and that as well. Yeah. So Jenny, maybe you could, in, kind of bringing us up to date, or maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the NYU Urban Farm Lab started.
Okay, great. All across the United States, I guess across the globe, universities are trying to engage in some form of agriculture. But usually we think about campus plots in those typical universities with the big quads, and they're tucked away somewhere. And NYU, we are in and of the city, and our campus is New York. And so the university did something pretty bold in 2007 and had established an Office of Sustainability. And one of the projects that they did was offer grants, small seed grants that were open to students, faculty, alumni, and staff. And so a group of us, and it was a combination of myself, an adjunct faculty member, some students, administrators, applied for and got the inaugural grant to create the first plot at NYU to investigate urban agriculture. And we always had our eyes on Silver Towers, this beautiful area that Melissa has shown and talked about. But what we were first given was a small area, and we had some raised beds, and we worked with a group of students. We worked with special ed, kindergarten and first grade, and a fifth grade class at a local public school, and had that project going for several years from 2007 up to 2010. In 2012, the university had a request for proposal. We applied for a grant. We won that grant, and we were able to build the farm that we have now. But that first year or two, we were only able to grow on about 1,000 square feet. It was really daunting, and it wasn't until Melissa joined us in 2015 with her expertise that we were able to go from 1,000 square feet to farming on the entire plot, which is over 4,500 square feet. So it's quite an enormous space, and it's been unbelievably exciting, and really proud to have watched how NYU has embraced it.
Yeah, and also just in having that extra space, it allows us to research and experiment with growing grains, or with growing corn, which is that picture on the right. And people, again, walking by on Houston Street and being like, is that corn that you're growing? So it's kind of a really fun experience to be able to do that and have all this space, right?
One interesting thing about corn that we did last year was that there are tree beds on Houston Street, just outside of the perimeter of the farm, and they were kind of dirty and messy, and so we started planting some flowers. But we're going to experiment with maybe putting some tomatoes in, or some corn, and it's a great conversation piece. We're not that campus farm that's tucked away that nobody can see. Everybody can see it. People walking down Houston Street say, like, what are you doing, or what is that? It's our favorite thing is to pass like a carrot through the fence, and people will say, that's not a carrot, it's red. It's like, carrots are not just orange, carrots come in all colors. Or pass somebody tomatoes that are yellow, or and The corn is the perfect example. Nobody has ever seen it. Certainly not growing in the middle of Manhattan.
Yeah, definitely.
So Melissa, this has been a challenging semester, and certainly we're all looking at education in very different ways. And I'm wondering, mid-semester, we were put on pause and all of the courses went remote. And so you were in the middle of a semester teaching several sections of Intro to Urban Agriculture. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you made that move to remote learning and what you're doing with the students this semester.
Yeah, I would love to. So it was kind of crazy because it was when all of this was happening. This was March, like mid-March, beginning of March. We're going into the growing season. The students have been in the classroom the whole time and they're waiting to go outside to finally experience the farm, and then we all go remote, right? But I always like to think about, and many artists think of this way as well, just in the sense of whenever you are limited, you just have to get creative, right? So I kind of thought about, and maybe you've seen this in the news and other things, but since we think about growing sustainably, we also think about less resources. So the less resources you could use, and also where does our waste go, right? So I started looking up really quickly how students could start growing at home, let's say if they didn't have seeds or even if they didn't have soil. And I found all of these ways that you could do it. So you could, for example, you could take like your, like if you're making celery or something like that, like let's say if you have a tuna fish sandwich, you chop up some celery, you have that whole base of the celery that usually people don't eat. You could actually put that in water and the celery will grow back. You've probably seen this in a lot of articles where scallions, usually when you get scallions, they still have like the roots on it. So when you chop off that green part of the scallion, you put a little bit of those roots in the water, just like you see in the picture in those two glasses, and then they'll actually grow back scallions. This won't last forever, but it's just a really fun way that all you need is the produce that you already have, and to chop that produce off, do what you usually do with it, and then save that end. So you could do that. You could also then compost your scraps and then grow from that. So there's so many different techniques that you could use. And I also just want to kind of show you all the different things. So you could do this with celery, like I already mentioned, or chives. You could do the same thing with lettuce. So if you get a head of lettuce, you could actually just chop the top of that head of lettuce off. You have that base. And then you just put it in a little bit of water, right? So all you have to do is fill up your glass with 1 or 2 inches of water so that the water is below where that lettuce will grow back. And then your lettuce will start growing. You could do the same thing with bok choy or with cilantro. Then if you do have a pot and soil, you could actually regrow your root vegetables. So you could do this with ginger or potatoes or garlic, or even with carrot tops. Now you won't grow a new carrot, but if you grow the green part, the carrot tops, you could actually make a pesto out of it. Students from our student clubs made this amazing carrot top pesto. So it also makes you kind of explore more and be more creative with what you're cooking in the kitchen. A lot of us are probably tired of beans by now. So maybe let's mix it up. Maybe we can make like a carrot top pesto or some fresh ginger, or, kind of regrow our bok choy and things like that. So it's been really fun with the students and exploring this. And I love, since, the syllabus is kind of set and I've had to change it a little bit, but I like challenging them on a weekly basis. Like, okay, guys, what are you going to do this week? Are you bored in your house? Let's not be bored. Why don't we take these resources that we already have, or take this waste that we already have and turn it into resources? So on that note, Jenny, maybe once everybody starts exploring these techniques and they have all of this extra root vegetables and things like that. They have tons of potatoes. They put their potatoes in a, well, actually, just to go over that really quickly, to do a potato, what you would do is usually when a potato grows out, it has those eyes that grow. So all you have to do is take a piece of that potato, cut that out with the eye on it, and put it in a pot of soil. And that will actually grow the top of the potatoes, and that will help you grow more potatoes. So let's say if you have all these root vegetables, you don't know what to do with it, or even if you have, you know, you bought all this excess fruits and vegetables. Jenny, how would you preserve all this extra stuff that you have?
Right, so pickling this is a perfect time if you've never tried pickling to do it. You know, a lot of times we find it's really daunting. Pickling, fermenting, canning sounds bewildering. Like, how do I begin? But this is an ideal time. Pickling is from antiquity. It's one of the oldest preservation methods. People have been doing it, societies around the globe, for thousands of years. And it is a super simple thing. If you were one of those people, remain nameless, that maybe hoarded vegetables 6 weeks ago when you thought we were going to be running out of food and we're not, and you have bags and bags of carrots in your refrigerator, and now they're starting to get a little they're bending a little bit. They don't have that snap anymore. You don't have to waste them. You can put them under cold water, freshen them up, cut them, and put them in a pickle brine. And all you have to do for a pickle brine, it's super simple, it is a vinegar base. And now is a time we're all at home, we're looking for projects. Go through your cabinets and you find you have 3 inches of a cider vinegar. You're not sure why you have it. 2 inches of balsamic vinegar. You have some white vinegars, a tarragon vinegar. You can make a mix, and it can be a ratio of like 2 to 1 water to vinegar. Depends on what, you know, how strong you like it. And then jazz it up. My family, we eat really spicy food. So when I make my brine, I throw in chilies in it. I throw in different peppers. I put lots of garlic, different herbs. And then you just put your clean, washed vegetables cut up right into it. You can see this gentleman, he's holding a pickling jar that he had done. This was a workshop we did right on the farm. Just pick the vegetables directly from our farm. We cleaned them, we washed them on the farm, cut them. I had made a pickling brine in advance. We had a tray of seeds and spices and herbs and chilies, and people just mix it up. Once you do it, it's ready. You can have it. It's called quick refrigerator pickle. There's actually no recipe. It's vinegar, water. If you're somebody who likes things sweet, dissolve some sugar into that vinegar. You season it any way you want.
Yeah, and you could also put salt. So you could put salt on those vegetables. When they're chopped up, you could put salt on those vegetables, and that will almost create a brine in a way. But also in the sense of, Jenny, can they just like taste it a little bit and see if they like it and see what they add? So they're almost like cooking in a way. But
it's, you know, and in a sense, pickling is a form of cooking because you are adulterating your food product. And so you are changing it. And so as you're mixing it, as you're putting it in the brine, taste the brine, stick the carrot, stick the radish, stick the scallion, stick the garlic, the Brussels sprouts, the beets, and you can pickle anything into the brine and taste it. Just know that in 24 hours, it'll get a little bit stronger. In 48 hours, it gets a little bit stronger. In a week, it's even stronger. So maybe you want to err on a little more conservative side and not overly season it. The other thing about the brine is that once you finish those vegetables, you don't have to throw out the brine. You can use that brine again and put some other vegetables in it. So it's from antiquity. People pickle because it's gotten trendy, but now it seems like it is the perfect activity to use extra vegetables during this time when we're home a lot, and we probably have some extra food that we certainly don't want to go to waste.
Now, Jenny, do we have to worry about like the safety of this? Like, could I get botulism or something like that? I mean, we don't want to use that word, but.
Right. So people are always really scared, and that's why a lot of people don't want to do canning. The difference between canning and pickling is when you're canning, It's going into a jar, and you are sterilizing that jar, and it is going in boiling water. And then you are creating something that is shelf stable, meaning you don't have to refrigerate it. Now that's great because it lasts a lot longer. The problem with that is you are running a health and safety risk. And unless you're in a completely sterile environment and you have expensive and proper equipment, you want to stay away from canning. And that, this is not the time you want to experiment with that. And why I love pickling is you can get the same effect. The only difference is it doesn't last as long and you have to keep it in refrigeration. But also you can do it without any anxiety and without any fear. Here's an example. Some jars that we have here, pickled carrots. This all came from the urban farm. So these were just a selection of carrots that Melissa didn't need to send to the kitchen. Some students take food home. Sometimes this was left. And when it is, we don't waste anything on the farm. When there's stuff left over, it's like we run in, we do a pickling workshop for the students.
Yeah, and in my class, it was interesting. We did some preserving techniques last week, and I remember I made some pickled carrots. And then we got a little fancy in my house, but we made banh mi sandwiches with the pickled carrots. Or if you do like pickled beets, you could eat them with hummus. Usually I don't like beets, but I like them pickled, right? And it was really fun because some of my students who they didn't think they would necessarily be into it, all of a sudden they're making 5 jars of quick pickles. And I remember one of my students, his mom was like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "You have 5 jars of pickles now." But it was just this really fun experiment to do. You could change the like flavor profiles, like salty or more vinegar, or maybe you want like some fennel in there, maybe dill, maybe coriander, all of these other things. You could really kind of experiment with it, right? And also exactly what you said, Jenny, just in the sense of like, maybe you don't like it a lot of vinegar, so maybe you'll eat it 24 hours after, right? Or maybe you like that really strong flavor and you're gonna wait like a week or 2 weeks or something like that.
Also, combining things are really fun. I mean, I tend to, radishes, when they pickle, they really hold their crunch. And so it's fun to do for a salad to put a pickle that has some carrots, some cucumbers, some radishes in it. It's really beautiful to look at. And then you get an entire medley of different pickled vegetables together.
Yeah.
So Melissa, can I just follow up with another question here about, for somebody who wants to start either growing at home, pickling at home, preserving at home, ways that you might suggest?
Sure. So there's a bunch of resources that we have. So just in the next slide. Yep. So Sandor Katz is actually, he's like the king of pickling and fermentation. I would definitely recommend this book called Wild Fermentation. And it kind of goes into how every culture all over the world has done these types of preservation techniques. So, or has done some kind of fermentation technique. So maybe a lot of you have seen online that everybody's making their own sourdough, and they make their own sourdough starter. So Sandor Katz will tell you how to do that. He'll tell you how to do quick pickles. He'll tell you how to do cold slaw. So there's all of these also different forms of cheeses. So if you just have some whey laying around, which I don't know if you do, but you can make ricotta cheese or farmer's cheese or something like that. So that's just a great book that will probably keep you interested for a long time, different yogurts and stuff. And then also, if you're just interested at growing at home in general, if you're in an urban area or not an urban area, I always give this to my students, which is The Essential Urban Farmer by Novella Carpenter. And in this book, she goes over everything from picking your lands to how to build your own growing beds, to what crops you should actually grow, what crops are in what season, how to grow them, how many of each crop you need to feed how many people. So if you have 4 people in your family, you need to grow like 20 different heads of lettuce or something like that. So that's really great. And then also, it's not too late to buy seeds. So I would buy them sooner than later, and excuse me, but a lot of seed companies are running out of seeds, but I would say you could still buy all of these seeds online. Mm-hmm. These are a bunch of different seed companies. Sometimes you could also buy seeds at supermarkets and things like that. And then also just for extra resources, many universities have extension programs. So they're either garden extension programs or small farm extension programs. Like, for example, Cornell has a great one. So if you're on the East Coast, if you're still on the East Coast, you can look up Cornell and it'll give you how to grow all these different varieties, growing calendars of when to sow it, when to harvest. So there's so much information out there. This is just a few, but hopefully that will help you get started. Yeah.
There are a couple of questions maybe that some of you are asking, and we'll just pop in and try to get to most of these if we can. So Melissa, do you want to answer that question about growing in an apartment with limited light? And then I can talk about vermin.
Yeah, sure. Hold on one sec. So I would say in growing in an apartment with limited light, usually what I will suggest is doing leafy greens. And also in the sense of one of the first projects that I have my students do is a grow project inside their apartments. So you could do sprouts, which are just like baby plants. So you're just gonna sow some seeds. You're gonna let that grow into the baby leaves or the cotyledons, and then you just harvest that, and that's a first crop. But usually leafy greens or herbs such as mint and things like that will do better in low light apartments. And then the other thing is that you could change your growing conditions. So you could just go online and you could buy a grow light, right? Or if you feel safe enough to go to a hardware store or something like that, sometimes they'll have grow lights. But you could just look online for a full spectrum grow light. You could just get a light bulb, put it into your lamp, put it over your plants, and then that will help them grow. So you're actually changing your conditions. So I would also suggest that instead of struggling with this low light, see if you could get like a $10 light bulb. And you know, some of us have access, some of us don't, but that might help with that.
Somebody asked if it was too late to start growing seeds, and it's not too late to start growing seeds. Some items like tomatoes are going to take, long. Peppers might, so you might want to start by some little starter plants, but certainly the really quick growing things like lettuce, arugula, mesclun, they grow really quickly. Radishes, we always do with little kids. We grow radishes because they're the immediate gratification. You plant them, they grow so quickly. So it's certainly not too late.
Yeah, so like, for example, baby greens, let's say if you want to do baby arugula or baby spring salad mix, right? That will only take 21 days to a month to grow. So you could still put that in your planters or little pots now. And then a month from now, you will be able to start harvesting from that. And then you could cut it back, and then a lot of times it will grow back. So again, in low light conditions, you could probably grow these different varieties. Maybe it might be too late to grow peas and things like that because they really like those colder temperatures. But other things, especially fast maturing crops, exactly what Jenny said, you could still kind of grow now.
Somebody had asked, one of the first questions that came in was about, do we have any concern in the urban farm around animals or vermin eating the vegetables? So I can say just the NYU Urban Farm Lab on Houston Street is an organic farm in the sense that we don't use any other inputs in it. And the way that we fight off the temptation of vermin coming in is we kind of make it unfriendly for them. And so Melissa is out there with a team every single day, weeding, thinning out crops so that there aren't places for the animals to burrow. And we're also, we just get down on our hands and knees and we're always looking, are there little holes? Are there ways that we can do it? So all of the pest maintenance that is done on the farm is in a completely all natural and organic way. But we'll get things. I mean, our favorite thing is sometimes when we put seed down, the birds love it, of course. And so we just plant with seeds super heavy-handed, knowing that the birds are going to come in, and we're certainly not going to rush them off. It's a beautiful sight to see when we're in the farm and there are these tiny little Manhattan birds flying in there. Melissa,
Yeah.
did you want to say anything else about?
Yeah, and also for the most part, a lot of times, for example, vermin won't necessarily like your fresh fruits and vegetables. They like junk food. They like a lot of fatty food. They like, if anybody's ever seen the pizza rat, like, it's taking a whole pizza slice on the subway steps. They don't really want your fresh fruits and vegetables. They want, if they have this buffet of fatty food in their in a garbage area, like across the street or something, they're definitely going to go for that. So exactly what Jenny said, doing these preventative measures from keeping them from burrowing. You could also use like chicken cloth or construction cloth that actually deters them from burrowing into soils. And exactly what Jenny said, keeping it open. So that they don't have little places to hide and nest and other things like that. So really, in any type of natural organic farming, you're always going to do these preventative measures, and observation is your first step. So looking around, constantly looking at the space. If you see a problem, you act on it right away, and that will definitely help you with that. But rats aren't really, like vermin aren't really interested in your, lettuce. They want that pizza next door. So that's just another kind of, a lot of people are worried about that. But yeah, there's tons of food, especially in urban areas. They're not that healthy. They don't like to be healthy. So yeah.
I'm going to ask one question about brine, and then maybe Melissa, you can address the question about the seedlings. So somebody asked about how long does brine last after you use it the first time? I generally do a rule of thumb of I'll use brine maybe 3 times, maybe 4. But the way that you're going to tell is that brine, when you've pulled the vegetables out of it, should be clear. If it's cloudy at all, that's a bacterial growth, and you just want to spill it at that point. And know that you used it, you got your money's worth. Vinegar's not very expensive. You used it once. The one way to preserve it longer is just don't ever put your fingers in that jar. And that sounds like a funny thing, and all we're hearing now is 20-second washing of hands. But just as clean as your hands are, just use a fork, use a toothpick, use something, but just don't put any of your fingers or flesh into that jar at all. And if you keep that brine really clean and it's not cloudy and it remains clear, you can use it a 4th, maybe even a 5th time. Depends how long. I make the pickles and I get so excited, so I usually eat them within 2 days. So I can use them over and over again.
Yeah, so you don't want to keep your like great grandmother's heritage brine, right?
No. We don't want to do that.
Yeah. There was one question here that after you have your veggies in water, if you could put them in soil. So this is the thing, you could take the ends of those vegetables and you could put them in water or in soil. You could use either technique. So if you want to start, let's say, them in water so that they get roots and you could actually see the roots and then transplant them into soil, you could do that. Or you could just directly plant those ends in soil. A really fun, interesting project might actually be to, this isn't local, but if you happen to go to the store and buy a pineapple, take the top of the pineapple and put that in soil. And then you could possibly grow a new pineapple. That's just like a really fun experiment. But this is almost like what you would call a cutting technique. So you could do the same thing with fresh herbs, where if you have a pot of fresh herbs, you could take a sprig off, cut it, take the bottom leaves off, and then either put that in soil or in some water, and that is called a cutting. So it's the same exact plant as the plant that you have in that pot, but you're reproducing it in that, or you're propagating it in that way. So you could do water or soil. Penny, did you see any questions?
Somebody had asked a question about how did we get started in urban ag, and I can say that for me it was really more of a hobby. As a food studies professor, I teach most of the courses in cultural analysis, and so it was really, and I'm born and bred as a New York City resident, so it was much more a hobby. Melissa's the one who is our expert in the credentials, and I can say that one of the greatest things about being a faculty member at NYU is that we have the exposure for sort of just lifelong learning, and 90% of everything I know about urban agriculture is what Melissa teaches me on a daily basis. Melissa, do you want to talk a little bit about your sort of more formal training?
Yeah, sure, definitely. I've definitely had some formal training. Like I was a master in the Nutrition and Food Studies department, but also I took a lot of horticultural classes. So if you go to certain botanical gardens, a lot of times they will offer like horticultural certificates. So that's what I got from the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens. If you're in New York City, there's a great program called Farm School, where people who already work in urban farms or just getting into it can take those classes. And again, these extension programs always have workshops and all these other things. Also, what I did was I went to the farmers market and I started talking to my farmers. I learned a lot, and I got some farmer mentors from actually just talking to them at the farmers market. So there was definitely a mix of getting that horticultural certificate, learning all of those proper techniques, experiential techniques, or experience. So I was also the garden manager at Roberta's restaurant, which was a very well-known restaurant, or is a very well-known restaurant in Brooklyn, where we grew or not all, but we grew a lot of our own fresh herbs and produce and things. And then the chefs used that in the kitchens to create some really interesting dishes. So it's the great thing about gardening or urban agriculture is that you could get into it in many different ways. And food kind of is in everything. So it's like once you're kind of interested in it, you could get to it in so many different aspects, from learning from your farmer, from taking these classes, and from also experience, right?
Mm-hmm. And just there's a question there about speaking to container gardening, and I think that's a perfect example of just trying it. It's a trial and error, and you can, in a very small space, just a little window box, start propagating, germinating some seeds. Just planting some arugula, some mesclun, different greens, and just kind of experimenting. And you can grow a lot in a really small window box, a tremendous amount. One of the grants that we had done about maybe 10 years ago at NYU was to look at all of the green space available at NYU. So clearly what we have, 4,500 square feet, is the largest green space for planting. But it was also to speak to faculty members and administrators and staff members around campus and look at and try to convince them of this perfect window space that they had with a southern exposure, and urge people to just experiment, just start planting in that area. There are, as Melissa said earlier, there are emotional benefits to doing it, to watching a plant grow, and there are also obviously health and environmental benefits to doing it as well.
Yeah. And also, if you have kids at home, making that your science project, right? Or part of their science lesson, where even just sprouting seeds, like I know a lot of people remember this project in like third grade or something, where you sprout pea seeds and paper towels and things like that. So continuing to have those grow, and then also the idea of saving seeds. So it's kind of amazing how many people in urban areas grow all these different varieties and then save the seed every year and then regrow it. Because there's so many people from all over the world who come and live in New York City, and they bring their varieties that they grew up with in the places that they're from, they bring them to the city. They grow like a really hot pepper on their fire escape, and then they save the seed from that and they grow it every year. And it's just in this little pot on their fire escape. Granted, it's legal to grow on your fire escape, but you could still do that. Well, not on your fire escape, but you could still do that, right? Where you don't need a lot of space. Exactly what Jenny's saying. Like, if you want to grow a tomato or a cucumber, maybe you need a bigger pot. Maybe you need a 5-gallon bucket or something like that. But if you want to grow a lot of baby greens or herbs or other things, they take smaller spaces, right? And also, a lot of people are getting into growing indoors. So you could actually create a little indoor grow kit if you want. Cornell Extension actually shows you how to make out of PVC pipe and a grow light your own like little very cheap indoor grow system. So there's so many ways to kind of get into it and practice it, and yeah.
There's so many kits out there on the market, but Melissa and I are really fans of a sort of more of a DIY, build it your own kind of mechanism. And it's people have been growing food since the birth of agriculture, the birth of civilization, and just to go out there and it's a trial and error. Right now the NYU Urban Farm Lab is, Melissa's growing a little bit on it, but we're unfortunately we can't be out there with students, but we really urge you, if you've never seen it, to please come by and visit us when NYU is back to being in person. We're on Houston Street. The line I always like to use is that we are by no means the largest urban agricultural plot in New York City, but we are arguably the most urban plot anywhere. We're not tucked away on some quad or in a park that you have to, hike to or drive to. We're right there, right on the street on 5 lanes of traffic. And that is a challenge, and that is really exciting. I mean, it is what makes NYU, it's sort of a microcosm of what makes NYU such an exciting place, right smack in the city.
Definitely. And also if you are interested in volunteering on the farm, once the farm is open, once the campus is open, we have bi-weekly volunteer days. We also have annual events, like we do our annual planting. We have our annual harvest festival. So if the campus is open in the fall, we're still going to be growing on it. So hopefully we'll have that harvest festival. You alums are definitely welcome to come and learn. And also in the Nutrition and Food Studies website, you could read a little bit more about the NYU Urban Farm Lab, and then we also have an Instagram. So if you want to check out what students are doing, these new initiatives that we're kind of doing on the farm right now, yeah, you could definitely get a lot more information from that as well. But we love having alums on the farm. We love I love teaching everybody. So anybody who wants to come, yeah.
And please, we have events on a NYU Alumni Weekend every year on the farm, tours of the farm, herb tastings on the farm. So NYU will be back in person as soon as possible. We miss campus, and we hope to see you there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professors Berg and Metrick. This has been a really excellent segment, and I think that there's been a lot of food for thought, lots of ideas for all the participants, which have been very active in the Q&A. I'm sorry to those of you that those questions we might not have had a chance to get to, but as both professors have mentioned, you are all more than welcome to stop by, volunteer, get involved, and roll up their sleeves with them. So I hope that you guys will all have the opportunity to meet in person. Thank you again, Professors Berg and Metrick.
Thank you for having us, Amanda. This was really fun.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Stay safe, fellow alums.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you too. To you attendees, if you are interested in further scholarly content, please check out our events calendar on the NYU alumni page under events and programs. Our 5-question series continues on Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Join us and Professor Kirk James with the Silver School of Social Work to discuss mass incarceration during COVID-19. Thank you all for joining. We here at NYU wish all of you a good, healthy, and safety weekend and many months to come. Thank you again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.